Welcome to the 2022 Eden Model United Nations.
Dear guests, Eden Community, Teachers and Organizing Committee, welcome to this year's edition of the Eden Model United Nations.
Firstly, I would like to introduce today's Presidium.
Eden's Head of School, Mr. John Miller.
Our Secretary General, Mr. Jose Carlos Luna Priego.
And our Undersecretary General, Ms. Elisa Saiz Calvet. Now, we would like to give a special recognition to the guest schools that are here today.
American School, Durango.
British International School, Houston.
British School, Kuwait.
Centro Universitario Anglo-Mexicano, Mérida.
Colegio Alemán Alexander von Humboldt.
Colegio Benavente de Tlaxcala.
Colegio Yaucali.
Instituto Dámisis.
Instituto México de Baja California.
Instituto México de Puebla.
Oak Ridge International School.
Repatec Campus, Ciudad de México.
San Roberto International School. And your host, Eden School, Mexico. We now invite our head of school, John Miller, to give a brief welcome speech.
I'd like to welcome everyone to EMUN 2022. Model United Nations is something that is near and dear to me. I was an international relations student back at Tufts University over 30 years ago. And when I was at Tufts University, they had something called the Foreign Policy Symposium, which was a student-led project to bring politicians and journalists and academics together to discuss one foreign policy topic that was very relevant during that year. The project has continued over the years. The year that I was a participant in the project, the project was about covert action by governments around the world. I did another project that was called the militarization of the third world, which talked about the way that state actors and non-state actors all contribute to instability, to arms sales around the world, to refugee crises. And so as a member of that type of a class and as a participant in those types of classes and student organizations, you get an opportunity to sort of see the world in a different way. And I think it's very similar to what you guys are going to be doing over the next few days as participants in the Model United Nations simulation. In fact, I wanted to actually be a diplomat. My original goal in studying international relations was to become a diplomat, but then I realized that I would be better suited and could make a larger difference as an educator. Because it came to realize that I started finding it difficult to decide which problem that existed in the world that I wanted to address, whether it was healthcare, whether it was poverty, whether it was the climate, the environment. And I realized that as an educator, for me, I was able to address the problems at their root cause, right? So if you think about problems that exist around the world as being a reflection of a lack of education, people that not necessarily know what they need to know in order to be able to prevent themselves from being a victim, if you will, or to contribute to a problem, that I felt like I could make the most difference as an educator. When I actually arrived, my first position as an international school educator was in Durango, Mexico, and at that school there was a fairly large, a solid Model United Nations program. Some of you may know the American Schools of Mexico have several different Model United Nations simulations. And the students, as they got more and more interested in Model United Nations, they decided that they wanted to participate globally. They wanted to attend simulations outside of Mexico. So they went to the United States, they went to Europe, they went to Asia, and on a large trip, a long trip, I should say, every year they would go on one trip. And if I think back as an educator for the last 30 years, one of the moments that I will always remember was a knock on my door by a group of students who had done Model United Nations simulations in different countries. And they came to me and asked if we could organize our own Model United Nations simulation. And I remember my initial reaction was, there are dozens of Model United Nations simulations. You guys attend them, and why would we need to create another one? And they said, no, Mr. Miller, we want to bring the Model United Nations simulation to Durango, because at that time, the American school in Durango was really the only school that even necessarily knew about Model United Nations simulations. So they wanted to bring the opportunities that they had to travel around the world and be a part of these special events. They wanted to bring it to their own city and to other schools. So we set up a meeting with the directors of all of the private schools in Durango, and they pitched their idea, and we ended up, and that's how CADMUN, Colegio Americano de Durango, Model United Nations, was created. And I just saw on their Instagram feed yesterday that the program continues, and it makes me very proud to have been a part of that, but more importantly to be able to say to our students that their voice matters. I feel like as educators we have the opportunity to provide students for their voice to be amplified, and things and events like the Model United Nations simulation really give an opportunity for students like you to be heard. And I feel like we have two opportunities every day, not just at Model United Nations. Every day as educators, we have two choices. We can design learning experiences that reinforce obsolete power structures and contribute to apathy and disillusionment. Or we can inspire the next generation to truly feel empowered as leaders, as active citizens who see themselves as agents of change. So I'm very proud of the students at Eaton School for hosting this simulation, and for all of you attending, for fighting against apathy and ignorance, for what's happening around the world. I'm confident that you will learn a great deal over the next few days, and will set an example for your classmates, your families, and your community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your words, John. Next, we will be hearing from our keynote speaker, Mr. Ismael Marcelo Hernandez Uscanga.
Son of a military mother and sport enthusiast, Ismael Hernandez trained for the modern pentathlon for 17 years before representing Mexico in the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Summer Olympics and taking home the bronze. Curiosity and restlessness have taken this Olympic medalist and Premio Nacional del Deporte recipient to the United States, where he received his MBA and now works for MasterCard, a world-leading financial company.
As a high-performance athlete, Ismael spent 50 hours a week training the 5 disciplines that make up the modern pentathlon. This level of dedication, however, did not stop him from completing his degree in economics at Tecnológico de Monterrey Campus Ciudad de Mexico, his MBA at Duke University in North Carolina, and his specialization in data analysis at Harvard.
Considered by many as the unexpected medalist and by many others as the best pentathlete in Mexican history, Ismael was recognized in the October 2016 issue of Entrepreneur as one of the 30 most successful Mexicans under 30, and by Quien as one of the 15 Mexicans who's changing Mexico.
His journey is full of successes and glory, but it is a testament to his constant effort, sweat, and sometimes tears. He builds and works on his sustained goal of being the best version of himself that he can be. Being an athlete taught him discipline, resilience, adaptability, and strategic goal setting, all traits he continues to use every single day.
One of the things that gives Ismael joy in life is giving back to the community, be that in Mexico or the United States. He teaches at the Tec de Monterrey, is a guest columnist for El Economista, and is a volunteer with the organization that serves Latinx immigrants in the U.S.
It is not a coincidence that his favorite quote is by the American runner from the 70s, Steve Prefontaine. To give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift.
Hello, American.
Perfect. So thank you very much for having me here today. I'm excited to be here with you. And pretty much I would like to share with you a little bit on how did I get to where I am. And so for that, like, I think first you need to understand where am I sitting right now. I live in New York City. I work for MasterCard, a great company in financial services. And I am tasked right now with creating a new product that is going to change the way the small business and small business minorities or owned by minorities access to credit. But how did I get here? It's a little more interesting than what I'm doing currently. My life as a child started in Cuautla. So whoever has been to Morelos, there's probably 45 minutes away from Cuernavaca, that is the capital of Morelos. There's this small city that is called Cuautla. And that's where I grew up. My first 5 years of childhood, I was raised by my grandparents. I was raised by my grandparents because my parents had me at a very young age. So actually, they had me even before they started studying college. They had me 18, 19 years. And so for an 18, 19-year-old person to be able to raise a kid without studies, it was a very challenging circumstance. My mom, she's an army doctor. She studied in the Escuela Médico Militar. My father, he had he studied engineering at El Tec de Monterrey, where he got a scholarship to finish and conclude his studies. And so my life, my first 5 years, it was a lot of time with my grandparents. Fast forward, when my parents graduated from college, I ended up living in Mexico City in an army base, thanks to my mom, that she was an army doctor. And in these small military base, I was fortunate enough to one day spot a group of kids that were training in this weird sport called modern pentathlon. So I approached the coach and I asked him, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And the coach said, "Well, we teach them how to run, how to swim, but also how to fence, how to shoot with a pistol, and how to ride horses." And for a kid of 9 years old, that sounded amazing. That was the perfect sport in the whole history. That's like playing to be a musketeer in the books of Alexander Dumas. So I was very excited with this opportunity of being able to train to become a musketeer. I trained this sport through middle school, through high school, and eventually through college. When I started college, I remember there was these. I started college in 2008. I studied economics at Tec de Monterrey, and one of my first memories was seeing the opening ceremony of the Beijing 2008 Olympics, where a friend of mine who I was actively training with, he was there in the opening ceremony representing Mexico in modern pentathlon. And I asked myself, well, he is my friend, he is my role model. If he's there, I can also be there. And so that was my next goal for my next 8 years, from 2008 to 2016. That was my main goal. To compete in the Olympics and eventually to medal for Mexico. I always had the mentality of I want to earn a medal. And I guess if I could leave you with now something right now is, do not be afraid of have bold dreams. It's better to have bold dreams and then you can backtrack it. For me, my bold dream was I want to have a medal, an Olympic medal. So in order to get an Olympic medal, I need to compete at my peak performance. I need to qualify to the Olympics. To qualify to the Olympics, I need to qualify for Pan Americans. To qualify for Pan Americans, I need to do a great competition in Central Americans that is usually 3 years before the Olympics. To qualify there, I need to make a good season. And that means competing, like have a strong competition in the World Cups. And so by having this idea of where do I want it to get, I backtracked all the goals that I needed to accomplish. So do not be afraid of being bold and do not be afraid of having big dreams, because eventually the worst that can happen is that you enjoy the process. And in the process, you will learn a lot of things. And in the process, you will actually be frustrated, be sometimes tired, exhausted, but that will also teach you how to push your limits. It will teach you how to be relentless. It will teach you how to be disciplined, how to work for a goal, how to manage stress. So after graduation, after I graduated, I eventually joined the army, and in parallel, I kept training to compete in the Olympics. Eventually, I missed the qualification spot in 2012, but I made it for 2013, 14, and 15. So what that means is, do you remember that I had like middle goals? 2013, I made one great season that qualified me to the 2014 fundamental competition. I won that fundamental competition that qualified me to the 2015 Pan American Games in Toronto, where I medaled and earned the qualification for the Olympics in 2016. So that was the first thing. The first thing, have your big goals, big objectives. The second big thing that you need to remember is it's not enough to have big objectives. Most of this, or accomplishing great goals, is about the narrative that you tell yourself. I remember I was preparing for the Olympics and we were in Colorado. We just went for a big run. I was training with a team of Ukrainians. I was training also with a team of, in that point, I think there were over there Guatemalans, Americans, and Germans. And the four teams, we were actually coming back from the run, and Sports Illustrated, that magazine. So eventually, what they did, they created these forecasts on all of the medals and all of the medalists for the 2016 Olympic Games. And of course, the favorite for modern pentathlon were a Russian, a Ukrainian, and a French. And so whenever we started discussing about this forecast between the teams, we eventually landed in a position where we were asking ourselves, well, who do we think it's going to win really? All of us, we were going to compete in the Olympics, not having our name sometimes there in that list was like, well, does that mean that I am not a favorite? And some of the people in the boss took it like, yeah, like the forecast is quite accurate. For me, when they asked me like, who do you think it will win? I answered them, I think I'll win it. And it was not out of pride. It was not because I wanted to be cocky. It was not because I wanted to show off. It was more because I knew everything that I was putting there, everything that I have invested, everything that I have done so far to get to that point where I was qualified to the Olympics. I had one more month to go and I was ready. The Olympics was my big dream. The Olympics was my party, my objective, the biggest day of my life. And I was not going to allow that a magazine tell me, you're not good enough. And so that's the second big message that I want to leave you today. Be careful with the narrative you're telling you. There are going to be people or experts who might tell you, you might not be good enough. There are better qualified people, but eventually everything it's about, what do you tell yourself? How much effort have you put to get to this point? How much more you're willing to push yourself outside of the comfort zone to arrive to that goal. So that's the second part. And then the third part is about celebrating the moments. I was lucky enough that day in Rio in 2016 to cross the finish line in third place, and that automatically gave me the bronze medal, the only bronze medal for a Latin American male participant in this sport, a sport that is usually governed and dominated by Europeans. And so after that moment, it was easy to celebrate. But thinking backwards, if I would have crossed the finish line on fourth place, the story probably would have been a little different. Yes, I would have probably not screamed and celebrated that much, but still I would have celebrated the process. Because eventually where you want to get at is the person that you've become while trying to achieve your goals speaks more about your discipline, your diligence, and how far are you willing to go to achieve your objectives rather than getting the objective done. In finance here in New York, you see that quite often. You usually see a rank of the highest performing hedge funds, the highest performing funds, the all-star investors. But the reality is that finance and stocks, they're sometimes not 100% rational. Some of them have a lot of noise, a lot of irrationality, a lot of variation and luck, quite to be quite honest. And so when you celebrate an investor for beating the market 25% this year and the next year and the year after, well, that's amazing. But you need to kind of understand what is the process, not just the objectives. Because if in the fourth year the manager gives you a loss of 200%, then it doesn't matter how much you won, because the process, it was flawed. The process eventually was not stable enough that was able to withstand a big variation and eventually ended in a big loss. So celebrate the process, learn about the process, focus on the process. The objectives, they are great. The goals will follow if you have a plan, a very structured plan, and you tell yourself the right narratives, but do not forget about the process. The process is also very, very important. So how does that translate into my life? So after winning the medal, the curious part about winning a medal is that everybody tells you where to get or what do you need to achieve in order to get there, but nobody tells you what's coming after. I planned my life around trying to climb that podium. I never planned my life around, okay, how am I going to get off? What am I going to do afterwards? And that was a very challenging question, a question that eventually allowed me to ask myself, what next? What should I do next? A big mountain that I need to climb, that keeps me motivated, that keeps me excited. And that big mountain was continuing my studies. I have always dreamt about being a successful businessman. And at that point, I dreamt about living in New York, the capital of business of our world. And in order to accelerate and to achieve that goal, I knew that I needed to have also middle goals. I needed to have a good school or good business school education that would allow me to understand and speed myself in the business that I have not developed yet because I was investing too much time in sports. I needed a renowned name in my business school to position me in a place where I was able to eventually live in New York. And so I cast my wide net. I started applying to multiple business schools, eventually got into Duke. Duke is one of the best business schools in the world. And it was a perfect fit for me because it had the perfect balance between high performance academics, the people, the network, but also the sports. Looking or watching a game at the Cameron Indoor Stadium, the basketball game of the Blue Devils, it was and it is one of the most memorable memories and memorable moments of my life. So I keep applying that. I know that I need to keep building my business acumen. I know that I need to keep pushing myself hard. I know where I want to go. I really know what do I want in the next 4 or 5 years. And it has a lot to do about the narrative that I'm also telling myself. That is, even though I do not have years and years of experience of a lot of people my age who started going at work when they graduated from college, I know that I have the skills that I developed through sports. And I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying living here. I'm enjoying having a family, a wife. I enjoy being able to go out on a run every morning. And I celebrate that. I celebrate all of the process. So with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I hope that you get out of here with these 3 points. Again, have bold objectives. Do not be afraid of having bold objectives. The second one is be careful with the narrative that you tell yourself. And then the third one is celebrate the process, celebrate the goals, celebrate everything that you achieve, because that's life. Life is the accumulation of small moments that make everything just better and wonderful. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ismael. Does anybody have questions that they would like to ask Ismael? You can either raise your hand or just approach here. Let's try to take advantage of something that delegates probably will not have during the live one. Questions? Okay, Ben? Okay.
What were some specific challenges that you had to face when you were continuing with your studies after winning the medal in the Olympics?
So continuing the studies while having like high performance or being like a high performance athlete is very complicated. I think the challenge is understanding that there is a big trade-off, the cost of opportunity for every activity that you decided you're going to commit time to. When you decided you need to train in the morning and it's 5 a.m., you understand that you're also a limited resource, that you might not be able to go out on a party. You can ask in college, you can ask Mario here, you can ask my friends. I do not think that they've ever saw me going to a party while going to college. And that's because I made that decision. I knew that I needed to train and work out next morning at 5 a.m. I knew that I needed to complete my homework. I knew that I wanted to also perform well in college. And that was my decision. And so because of that, I didn't have that much interaction with a lot of people from my generation through parties. I love my friends and I have great friends from college. But the main reason why I love them is because they were able to understand my particular situation and nature on what I was going through and the challenges that were these trade-offs that I needed to make.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, how did you manage to balance like the different aspects of your life, like college and sports and friends and family and everything?
Everything goes back to communication. So once that you decided you want to make that trade-off, everything is around having clear communication with your family, with your friends, with your professors and teachers. So through college, for example, I've always told my professors when I had a competition or a training camp that would make me not be able to attend their classes. And so I've always talked to them beforehand, 2 or 3 months beforehand, because I knew that was coming. And with that, I earned their trust. They saw that I was a hard worker, not just somebody who was being an athlete and not being a great student. My family and friends, I usually spent either my birthday or Christmas competing or at training camps. And the way that I went through that was just communicating with my friends that I was not going to be able to celebrate my birthday and have a big party, or with my family that I was not going to be able to be there for Christmas and New Year's Eve because I was going to be training. So I think the way that you manage it is with communication. Of course, there's a lot of planning and hard work that goes into make this happen. I'm going to assume that you are willing to do that. I'm going to assume that if you are committing yourself to be an athlete and being a good student, you're going to put the effort for that. You're going to structure your plan in a way that makes sense, that you feel happy and satisfied, that you have and give yourself enough time to recover, to decompress, to enjoy a book if you want, to listen to a podcast, to do whatever you want. But eventually, I'm going to assume that you're going to be giving your best. And so once you decide that you want to do that and go all in, everything is around communication and having clear and proper communication with all the parties and all the people that are surrounding you.
So here in Mexico, not many people know the sport that you do and the sport that you got a medal on. So what this sport consists in, and what is like the hardest stage to dominate or to practice and to to be able to achieve?
You're right. Like no, I would say like a limited amount of people knows about this, which is a shame. But it's not just in Mexico; it's actually worldwide. For me, I think it's just a spectacular sport that allows you to understand a little more around dynamics of life. So life, if you take this into a microcosm, life is about balance. It's about who is a great student, a great friend, a great worker, um, in and everything in balance, right? You can be the best of the best party guys, but then probably you will not be able to have like a successful career because you're investing everything in going and party. You might be the best businessman, but what if your relationship suffers because of this, and then your wife and your kids were going to be neglected, right? So everything is around balance. So I wish more people learn or know this sport, because for me it taught me the nature of balance at a very young age. So the sports are running, swimming, shooting, fencing, and horseback riding. Running, it was natural to me. I was a good runner. I'm very skinny, lengthy, and I'm a good runner up to now. Like, it's my favorite sport and I still do that. The part that was the hardest, I would say that every sport was very, very hard when I was learning how to do it. However, the one that came least naturally to me was fencing. So I was not a good fencer, and that had to do with the fact that I overanalyze and overthink rather than react. So I have I like structure. I like thinking. I like processing before making a decision. Fencing, it's more around reaction, and if you do not react fast enough, then the opportunity to hit your opponent passes. And so that's the hardest part, like how to fit a structured mindset in reaction in a sport that requires you to be fast and speedy. I think that was a very hard sport for me. The way that I went around it was playing with my strengths, and I knew that I was structured. So I started studying my opponents. I started recording videos of them. I started analyzing the competition. I started looking at them, and when I saw the mistake that I have seen so many times in videos, then I would take the opportunity. So I guess it just learn how to play with your strengths. Fencing for me was my weakness, but I was able to leverage something that I was good at in order to overcome a little the difficulties of that sport.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez, for your words.
Finally, to conclude this opening ceremony, we would like to recognize our Secretary General, Jose Carlos Luna Priego, to formalize the inauguration of EMUN 2022.
Good afternoon, dear delegates, professors, organizing committee, and guests. It is a great pleasure to be here just a few moments before the 2022 edition of the Eton Model United Nations. As you know, we live in a very difficult time, and it is our job as young students to demonstrate the powers that we have in our minds. Us young people need to fight for our ideas, defend ourselves, and above all, seek new solutions for old problems. In history, the people that have opened their mouths and made noise are the ones that made the difference. They took risks and fight to defend what they believe in. And today, I invite all of you to take these risks. Be fearless and never let anyone bring you down. Fight for what you believe in. It seems exaggerated to imagine that today, in a model United Nations, together we are achieving a change. It is amazing to imagine the power that young people have and the importance of spaces like Model United Nations. Model UN gives us an opportunity to show a better version of ourselves. MUN gives us the opportunity to expand our knowledge. It may not seem that you're not changing anything, but today you're changing everything just by being here. Without further ado, I want to congratulate each of the members of the organizing committee for the passion they have given to this project, and I also want to congratulate all of the delegates for daring to be here today. Now, I can only encourage you to give the best of you in these 3 days. and show that young people have great solutions. Good luck to each and every one of you. And now, being March 17, I formally declare EMUN 2022 open.